Welcome back to Only Talk Sports. So we talk sports every single day, or at least we try to. I'm Ernst Jeffrey. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our video. There are not a lot of teams in college basketball that have had a better offseason than the Indiana Hoosiers, and Indiana desperately needed a great offseason. And Mike Woodson, he is cooking in the transfer portal right now. All of the crystal ball predictions for players that analysts have picked to go to Indiana, they have all come true. Oumar Ballo, he is transferred from Arizona to Indiana. He is going to be a big addition for the Hoosiers next season at the center position. Miles Rice, the point guard from Washington State, has transferred to Indiana. The Hoosiers desperately needed a lead guard to replace Xavier Johnson, and now Indiana has got another solid point guard, a point guard with a lot of upside and potential, and Kanaan Carlyle, the transfer from Stanford, he is committed to Indiana as well. And I'm going to go over this trifecta of transfers that Indiana is bringing in for next season, and also talk about the rest of the Hoosiers roster as well, and potentially some other players Indiana is looking at in the portal, and why Indiana might end up being a very dangerous team in college basketball next season. Now, we got to definitely pump the brakes. I'm not saying that Indiana is going to end up being a top team in the Big Ten and possibly like a top 10 to 15 team in college basketball, but I really think Indiana is now firmly a top 25 team for college basketball next season, at least in the preseason, based off of everything Mike Woodson has done in the transfer portal. Right now, Indiana has the best transfer portal class in college basketball with 3 commits, 1 5-star transfer, and 2 4-star transfers. And Joe Tipton just tweeted out that Kanaan Carlyle, a top 10 player in the portal, has committed to Indiana. The 6'3" freshman guard averaged 12 points per game this past season. He was a former top 50 recruit. And even though Stanford was a bad basketball team this past season, it was not because of Kanaan Carlyle. He had a good year. He definitely still has a lot of improving to do. He's a young player, only going to be a sophomore next season, and he still has a ton of upside to his game. But when you look at the fact that Indiana losing Khalil Ware to the NBA draft, that's not a shock at all, because Khalil Ware had a fantastic season for Indiana. Even though they did not make the NCAA tournament, it was not because of Khalil Ware. But Xavier Johnson's gone. He had a lot of injuries this past season. That really hurt the Hoosiers. But look at what Indiana is bringing back from this past season. Trey Galloway, a guy that could be an all Big Ten player this year as a fifth-year senior. That's a huge returnee for Indiana. Malik Renew is now going to be a junior, and if he can cut back on his foul troubles, he could be a fantastic player next to Oumar Ballo down low for Indiana next season. Mackenzie Mbako's back, the Big Ten freshman of the year. That's a huge re-addition for Indiana as well, because he was a former 5-star recruit. He could have been a guy that went off to the NBA, but he is deciding to come back. Ja'Kai Newton is a guy that has not played yet for Indiana, has had some injuries. He's got some upside. Gabe Cupps is back as well, along with Anthony Leal, who will be good depth pieces next season. But now Indiana is filling in through the transfer portal the positions that they desperately needed, because they really lacked guard play this past season. And really, Indiana has lacked good guard play for years. And when you look at the fact that Miles Rice, who ended up being an all Pac-12 level guard last season for Washington State, and he is only technically a sophomore this season, even though he's been in college basketball for several years, and he possibly could be the best league guard Indiana has had since Yogi Ferrell if Miles Rice can really improve. Yes, he struggled to shoot from 3, but still, he's a good free throw shooter, and his three-point shot does not look broken. He looks like a guy that could definitely improve his three-point shooting percentage. And then Oumar Ballo, yes, he's a bad free throw shooter, but he's a beast down low. And with Zach Edey gone in the Big Ten next season, I'm really liking the fact that Indiana is going to have one of the biggest players in the Big Ten next season, who is a fantastic offensive and defensive rebounder, and he is a load to handle in the paint. If you give him the ball anywhere near the basket, he is going to finish it. And then you talk about a guy in Bryson Tucker, who's a 5-star freshman that Indiana was able to land after Liam McNeely decommitted. And that's the crazy thing. After Liam McNeely decommitted, it looked like it was all over for Mike Woodson. All the Hoosier fans wanted him fired, but ever since that has happened, everything has been great for Indiana. All of these players are returning from last season, like Malik Renew, Trey Galloway, and now they're bringing all these talented players through the portal, and now you just add Kanaan Carlyle to the bunch, and he might end up being the best transfer that they add. I know Oumar Ballo, he's the top-rated guy in the portal, and he is a massive addition for Indiana. Losing Khalil Ware, Indiana desperately needed a center to replace him, and the fact that Mike Woodson has had the track record he's had with Trace Jackson Davis and Khalil Ware, Oumar Ballo could end up following in their footsteps to be a guy that goes off to the NBA. That's massive for Indiana. Miles Rice, he's huge for Indiana as well, because because he is a point guard that they desperately needed. But Indiana needs a combo guard, a shooting guard that is dynamic. And Kanaan Carlyle, even though, yes, he struggled from three this past season at 32%. Like I said earlier with Miles Rice, being a 27% three-point shooter, Kanaan Carlyle can improve. And he's even younger than Miles Rice is. So I think he definitely will be a better three-point shooter next season. He also shot 78% at the line. And plus, he shot 40% from three and catch and shoot opportunities. So his shot is not broken. And he's so talented off the dribble. And he's a pretty good facilitator. So you think about the fact that Indiana is going to have Miles Rice, who's a really good passer, being at the point guard position for Indiana next season. Then you got Kanaan Carlyle, who's also a solid passer as well, probably playing alongside him. And then Trey Galloway, who was one of the top assist men in the Big Ten this past season. So Indiana's going to have three dynamic guards who can play in the pick and roll next season for Indiana and also be able to get that ball down low to Malik Renew and Oumar Ballo. Indiana's roster is looking really dangerous. And CBS Sports already ranked Indiana as the number 24 team in college basketball prior to the Kanaan Carlyle edition. Now that Kanaan Carlyle has transferred to Indiana, the Hoosiers have to probably be a top 20 team in the CBS top 25 poll. Preseason polls mean absolutely nothing. Indiana can go out there and be awful next season if Mike Woodson's offense is still broken and he does not properly utilize these players, or if these guys just don't mesh together. That's the issue with the transfer portal. We've seen a lot of teams try to build through the transfer portal, and it just does not work because, unfortunately, when you're trying to get all of these players that have never played together before, you're trying to get those guys to play the way you want them to play on offense and defense. It just does not work. We saw Arkansas this past season have a talented transfer class, and Eric Musselman's team, they went under 500. So still Indiana cannot be good next season. But there is a whole lot to like about the additions that Indiana has made so far, and the Hoosiers might not even be done yet. Indiana desperately needs to bring in some more three-point shooting because even though I am saying that Miles Rice and Kanaan Carlyle, they can end up being better shooters next season in their sophomore years, that doesn't mean that they will, and especially because they're probably going to be facilitating more and driving to the basket at a higher rate than shooting threes. If Indiana could bring in a guy like Connor Essegian, the former Wisconsin guard, who as a freshman shot really well from three, he could be a guy that could kind of play like a Cormac Ryan type of role for North Carolina this past season if he could get some more minutes at Indiana than he did for Wisconsin this past season. He had a back injury this past season and he fell out of the lineup because AJ Storr transferred to Wisconsin, but I think Connor Essegian could be a good addition. He's also from Indiana as well. Indiana's also looking at a forward from Evansville as well who shot 41% from three. I think Indiana needs to bring in a guard that can shoot the three ball at a high level off the bench like a Connor Essegian, and I also think Indiana needs to bring in a forward who can play behind Oumar Ballo and Malik Renew that's also a good three-point shooter, since Malik Renew, he can shoot threes, but that's not really a major part of his game, and Oumar Ballo doesn't shoot threes at all. And they're also looking at Elijah Malone, who's not even from the Division I level. He played at a smaller college. He shot 37% from three this past season. He's a 6'10" center. If Indiana can land one of the two transfer bigs that they're looking at right now, either the guy from Evansville or the guy from Grace College, and if they can get a guy like Connor Essegian to come off the bench and shoot some threes, then I think Indiana should be set for next season. Kanaan Carlyle should be the last big addition that they bring in through the transfer portal because Indiana's starter minutes, they're basically gone. So they're not going to really be able to sell another great player through the portal to come to IU. That's why a guy like Ryan Conwell, who they were looking at from Indiana State, he went to Xavier because he realized, well, Kanaan Carlyle, he's probably going to Indiana. They already got Miles Rice. I don't want to come off the bench. So that's why Indiana wasn't able to land him. But if they can get a couple more of these guys off the bench, then the Hoosiers roster is going to be loaded next season. I don't think they're going to be able to fill up the 13-man roster. You would love to do it, but Indiana, they don't have to fill up the 13-man roster. As long as they have 11 or 12 guys who are really good and none of them are injured like last season when you had Xavier Johnson and Ja'Kai Newton injured, then I think Indiana should definitely be ranked in the top 25 to start next season. It doesn't mean they're going to be that good, but when you look at Miles Rice coming over from Washington State, Oumar Ballo coming in from Arizona, and Kanaan Carlyle coming in from Stanford, the Pac-12 trio, Indiana benefited from the Pac-12 dissolving and all these guys wanting to transfer to bigger conferences. I think the Hoosiers have a lot of upside, and Kanaan Carlyle, he might have the highest upside of the three. I think he could end up being one of the best players on Indiana's roster next season if he can develop. But Mike Woodson, he has caught a lot of flack at Indiana for the roster they had this past season, but the Hoosiers roster is looking a whole lot better for next season. Doesn't mean the talent's going to mesh together, but it does look like this roster is a whole lot more talented than last season. And if Mike Woodson can piece it together with a couple more transfers transfer portal additions, then I think the Hoosiers are going to be a dangerous team in college basketball next season. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below about Kanaan Carlyle, the Stanford transfer guard, committing to Indiana, ending the trio of players that were all picked to go to IU, and what you think about Mike Woodson's roster building for the Hoosiers next season, and whether you think Indiana will be a fantastic team in college basketball next season, or if you think that they're still going to end up struggling next season. Subscribe to the channel if you like sports content. Like this video down below. Follow me on Twitter as well. Link is in the description, and I'll see you next time.